Clear.
Blair.
Hi, and welcome to Cinema Studies. This is the show where we talk about the films that have stood the test of time and the history behind their creation. Today, I am joined by my first return guest, Chris. How are you doing, Chris?
What's up? Yeah, I'm doing good.
Doing good. Great. So so before we start, if you're watching this, please like and subscribe. Help me out a lot. Leave me a comment. What we're talking about today is absolutely one of my favorite movies. We're going to talk about it super in depth. We're going to go through the entire film. So hope you follow us along that journey, and let's go ahead and get into it. So the film we're talking about today is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. It is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. Chris, tell me your history with this movie. When did you first see it, and what's your story about it?
Oh, we only watched it for the first time, last year? I think we did it for an episode of Shopcast, and I had never seen it before. Yeah, when me and you got to be friends and Randy got to be friends, it was just a movie that you guys brought up a lot, and I had never seen it before. Not because I wasn't interested or anything like that. It just one I'd never caught. But yeah, I definitely want to check it out because I knew you liked it a lot, and I know Randy had kind of come around to liking it more after hearing you talk about it a lot and how much you like it. So yeah, and watched it on the show and liked it a lot. And I've seen a few more Carpenter movies since, like Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness. And we watched Assault on Precinct 13, and just dove into a lot more 80s movies than I have in my past, because it was kind of a spot where I didn't really watch a lot. And it seems like almost every movie we watched, I was like, that was a good movie, but I like The Thing more. I like that movie too, but I like The Thing more. And it kept sitting at this top spot on my list of first time watches, and yeah, it's still up there. So yeah, I was excited to get to talk about it again.
Yeah, no, it definitely holds up. It's stood the test of time. So let's go ahead and just talk about John Carpenter. He's considered one of the great horror directors. Let's talk about his early life a little bit. So he was born in 1948 in New York, but moved to Bowling Green, Kentucky as a little kid. His father had a PhD in music and played the violin, which explains a lot about him. Moving from a big city to a small town really made him feel isolated quite a bit.
Yeah, Bowling Green's pretty small.
Yeah, made him feel like an outsider. So it really made him sort of focus on his love for the arts, his love for music, and his love for film. Yeah, he decided he really loved film and wanted to do that. So he went to California and went to USC, which is considered like the best film school in the country. He got taught by some of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Orson Welles was teaching there.
Wow.
John Ford, Howard Hawks. So he learned from the best.
Wow.
And he was considered a really good student. So yeah, he did his thesis film, which is called Dark Star, which he made, and then decided, I think I can make this a feature. So he dropped out of film school and finished the film as a feature, and that is his first film. But so after that, his next film was Assault on Precinct 13.
It's terror in the night. It's the most shattering assault on a police station in history. Assault on Precinct 13.
This is the siege. It's a goddamn siege.
That was his second movie?
His second movie.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Incredibly low budget still, and independent. He made it himself. Like, he had Final Cut, he did everything, and considered a really like good movie. But that's where he started doing the music and all that stuff. And part of the reason he does the music for his films is because most of his films are very low budget, and it's just cheaper to do it yourself. Takes a synthesizer and a few instruments, and he talks about his music as either wallpaper or carpet for his movies. It's not something that you're supposed to really think about, just something that is always present.
Not a bad way to look at it.
After Assault on Precinct 13, he was hired to do a film which originally was called The Babysitter Murders, which became an iconic Halloween.
Halloween, the night he came home.
One of the biggest horror movies of all time, and set his career trajectory for the rest of his life. He did 2 other films before The Thing: The Fog, another film with Jamie Lee Curtis, which is a pretty good another little low budget movie about sort of a haunted fog that rolls through the town with there's like ghost pirates and stuff in it. It's pretty good little movie. And then he did Escape from New York.
John Carpenter's Escape from New York, the greatest escape of them all, is about to blow the future apart.
Which was, at the time, like nothing that we had seen from Kurt Russell. He actually grew up doing Disney movies.
Really?
So he did not have the badass persona that really Escape from New York and then The Thing gave him, and then kind of changed his trajectory into the 80s. So a little bit of history behind The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing is, first of all, it's a remake of a movie from 51, but that movie is actually based on a book. The original novella is called Who Goes There? It's written by John W. Campbell, and it was published in 1938. What I thought was interesting about the book is that it's actually a lot closer to the Carpenter movie than the original film is.
And I've actually heard that this was adapted from a short story, but I'd never actually known that it was remade. Like I had heard the story referenced, but never that it was actually a movie before.
So actually, if you watch closely in Halloween, the original The Thing, it's called The Thing from Another World, is playing on the TV.
Okay.
Because John Carpenter grew up with the movie and actually loves it. It was an old favorite of his. The movie came out in 1951, and at this time, all we had were things like Frankenstein. So the monster movies were very different, and the technology was different too. Trying to do a shape-shifting alien was like really not possible. The monster in that movie is basically Frankenstein. It looks like Frankenstein.
Okay.
Doesn't really hold up. There is some good sequences. There's some paranoia, but the film was a big hit at the time, and as I said, Carpenter saw it as a little kid. I think he said he was like 4 or 5 years old when he saw it the first time, and it scared the crap out of him. All right, so a few other notes before we get into the movie. This film was shot in 3 different places. It was shot, all the interiors, or most of the interiors, are all shot on the back lot of Universal, which was during one of the hottest summers they had. So they had to refrigerate the stage to try and get breath, and they were only able to refrigerate it to up to like 40 something degrees. So they had to make everybody like drink hot coffee and stuff to try and get breath.
All right. Yeah, this is something I wanted to ask you about, because I was curious. I mean, I'm sure they didn't film this in Antarctica, so
No.
I mean, they obviously had some open snowy area that they filmed like the helicopter scenes.
The opening helicopter shots and things like that were filmed in Alaska.
Okay.
And then they built a camp in British Columbia that they built in the summer and waited for winter so that it would be covered in snow.
Right.
And then they went up there and they shot for several weeks. And as we'll get into, this was a very difficult shoot.
It's grueling weather, cold, it's miserable. Cameras are freezing, so you have to leave them outside. It's at the top of this mountain. It's a mine, and every day these trucks loaded come roaring down the mountain. The actors had to drive in a bus to the location, and they almost went over the edge of the Stewart Highway.
Before we jump into the movie, there's one other person I want to talk about real quick, which is the special effects guy named Roboteen. And up until this point, he had done very little. He shows up in the fog. He's like the main pirate ghost, and he did a couple of special effects shots for Carpenter. Kind of just showed up and was like, "Hey, I want to help you with your movie. I think this stuff is cool," and kind of made friends with Carpenter. And then right in between that, he made a movie called The Howling, which is sort of a low budget werewolf movie, which has like really good special effects. So while Carpenter was in pre-production for The Thing, he was like, "Hey, you got to do this movie." One of the most interesting things about this guy is that he was 23 years old. For this movie, the special effects are so insane and so creative. So he worked with a storyboard artist named Mike Plug, who did a lot of art for like Marvel Comics. There's some really cool storyboards that a lot of them are very close to what shows up in the movie. And they really designed and figured out all of these crazy transformations and stuff in the storyboards. And one thing Carpenter told him was he didn't want it to be a guy in a suit.
My fear was they'll laugh at us, you know. There'll be a joke. I mean, even as great as the movie was, and Alien was a terrific movie, it's still, in the very end, up stood this big guy in a suit. Oh, I don't want to do a suit. You know, I want something that's alive. So when I saw that stuff coming out, I was like, oh, man.
When he started to see the stuff that he was making, he was really pleased because, you know, it was different. It was weird.
Yeah.
It was strange. But as we'll get into a little bit, he was a little bit over his head.
So what I did was I was so, wanting this stuff to come out so great, I actually lived at Universal for a year and 5 weeks without taking a day off. I worked, 7 days a week. And I ended up, working so hard that I ended up in the hospital at the end of the show. John looked at me and he said, "You don't look well." He goes, "Somebody take this guy to the hospital," right?
Yeah, so that's all the pre-production and notes I have. It was a lot, but there's a lot to this movie, so I really wanted to do it justice. So, but that's it. Are you ready to get into the movie?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's get into it. The film begins with a spaceship flying across the sky. And then we see the title burned into the screen. Then we get into the first shot, which is the helicopters flying over the mountains, and we get that score.
Yeah, just remember, as I've only seen this movie once, but just hearing that again just made me smile, because I don't know, you like, it all comes back, like I know what I'm gonna get now, so
Yes.
like I'm excited.
There's something about that score too. Like it almost reminds me of like the Jaws theme or something. It's like the slow creep of death or something. Like there's something about it that's doing a very similar thing. But so we see those helicopters flying across the mountains. We see a guy lean out with a rifle and start shooting at a dog. So we see them, they're chasing this dog across this snowy plain. We get a little introduction of Kurt Russell, drinking his J&B and playing chess against the computer.
Your move, king to rook 1. My move, rook to knight 6. Checkmate. Checkmate.
Cheating bitch.
High-end computer device there.
I mean, at that time, that was the height of gaming, right there.
Yep.
The men from the camp come out, and so they hear the helicopter and they hear the gunfire, and they all come out, and they're looking around trying to figure out what's going on.
Circling the camp. Who is he?
The helicopter lands in front of the camp, and one of the guys jumps out, and they start shooting at the dog as it's running into the camp, and the dog jumps up and jumps on one of the guys, and the other guy from the helicopter picks up a grenade. Then it slips right out of his hand, and he drops it into the snow. Blows the helicopter up, and the other guy's just chasing after the dog, trying to shoot it. And
I had a very different reaction to watching it this time than the first time. I mean, the first time, of course, you're like, oh no, don't get the dog. But this time I'm like, get him. Because
right.
I know it's going to happen now.
One of the guys inside the camp breaks the window and shoots the guy right in the head. As the other guys are trying to put out the fire in the helicopter, we see Clark come out and start petting the dog. And then we get a line from Kurt Russell.
First goddamn week of winter.
He's got great lines.
Yes, I was about to say, he's got a few really good lines in this.
I mean, he's got all the greatest lines, really. Like, and something I didn't even write down, but that was in some of the interviews that Carpenter did was he originally wasn't planning on going with Kurt Russell, and the reason was he didn't want anyone really recognizable. Like, all these guys are just sort of really small character actors, other than him. And part of that was he wanted it to be an ensemble where you didn't know who the thing was. He wanted it to be able to be anybody. But it's hard to think of anyone else but Kurt Russell doing this. And if you're thinking of someone who's a leader, he pulls it off perfectly.
Yep. And nobody could have pulled off that cowboy hat like he did.
Yes. After that helicopter scene, we get into some of the introductions of the cast. Like, this is a really big cast. We don't get backstories for any of these characters, which is important because you don't want to be able to know too much about them because it's important for the paranoia element of it. But they give you enough character traits right from the beginning to differentiate all these different people.
McCready, Mac, get your gear on.
And we hear Copper say that he wants to go, investigate. He wants to go check out that Norwegian camp. As we see the helicopter pick up and fly away, what do we see lurking below the table?
It's the dog, right?
Yeah, the dog is watching.
Yeah, I noticed that a couple of times. Like, they focus on the dog a pretty good bit, and again, doesn't really dawn on me until now, but they're kind of laying it out.
We see the dog kind of creeping down the hallway, and then we see him walk into that room, and we see the shadow on the wall and the head turn, kind of just setting up question after question.
You don't know what happens, but
yes.
Again, it's obvious that something's gonna happen in this scene. You just don't see it.
Or were you trying to figure out who it was?
Yes, I think I do. I don't know his name. It's not the doctor, but it's
Mhm.
the other kind of like larger guy. He wears like a turtleneck because you can kind of see the turtleneck in the shadow a little bit.
If I'm gonna guess, I mean, it's impossible to know, and there's unknowable things in this movie on purpose.
Yeah,
But
but it's fun to guess.
yes, and if I'm gonna guess, I would say it's Norris, the guy whose chest opens up.
Yes, yes,
Because you can see in the shadow he's got kind of poofy hair, and he doesn't have a beard. So that narrows it down a little bit too.
right. And it
And-
explains what happens later in the movie too.
But after the fade to black, we see the helicopter flying into the Norwegian camp. They go into the camp. Everything's burned up. They're creeping around through the hallways, trying to figure out, they're not seeing anybody. Then they see the bloody axe in the door. And this is where another moment where the score really kicks in. Because something I didn't mention, we were talking about music earlier, but this is the first movie that is not credited to John Carpenter for the score.
Mm.
It's credited to Ennio Morricone, which is one of my favorite composers. Did movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West. He did a lot of westerns. He's an Italian composer. Even though that first musical cue you hear, that thrumming score, is definitely Carpenter. Most of the music throughout the movies, the violins and things like that is all Morricone.
Yeah.
And it does bring a different feel to any of the other movies that he's made.
Yeah, man, it's great. It's subtle. It's not over the top, but it just works great. It's perfect for the movie.
My God, what the hell happened here?
I think that would probably be the first like real big special effects shot. Yeah, and it's creepy, and it sets the tone. And we see Copper, he starts grabbing some of the paperwork and some of the the videotapes and stuff around. And McCready is looking around, and they find what you call the ice coffin,
Yeah.
the big block of ice. The questions are just piling up. Like, what is going on? And then they go outside, and we get the real first special effects shot, that charred body. And we don't even really get a good look at it at first, but we see this sort of face in a distorted scream. They head back to the camp, and we see the helicopter land back at the camp. And what do we see looking out the window?
The dog.
The dog. The dog is watching. It's always watching. And then we get the real first look at this body as the guys are standing around the table, and they pull the blanket off of it. And how would you describe this, Chris?
I mean, it's just like you took probably 3 different bodies, broke them all apart, and like put them back together and melted it.
Yeah,
and some of it is like deformed and like partially transformed. And you can tell it's not 100% human. You can tell it's something a little different. It's got longer legs, I think, if I remember correctly, and just things that don't look entirely 100% human. It looks a little different.
So they all kind of get a look at that, and then I think we get another fade out, and we go to later on in the evening, and everyone's sort of winding down. Bennings is playing poker, and we see the dog brush past him under the table, and he yells at Clark to go put the dog
He kind of
away.
freaks out.
Clark, will you put this mutt with the others where he belongs?
We see Clark take the dog, put him in the cage, and turn out the light. We hear the other dogs in the kennel start sort of yipping and growling at the dog. How would you describe this, Chris?
Like the head splits open apart and another head comes out of that.
Yes.
I think, and all the tentacles start coming out and it starts spewing stuff at the other dogs.
It grows all these like crazy, like big spider legs coming out of its body. We see one of the other dogs like jumping at the cage, trying to rip the chain link apart to try and get out. Like dogs know, like they, as soon as they can sense it immediately, like they know something's wrong. Clark hears the noise. He runs back to the kennel and he goes to check it out, and he like the light won't turn on, so he opens the door. And all the tentacles start like trying to creep out of the cage. And then we see McCready. He's going to get a beer from the fridge and hears some weird noise and runs over there to see what's going on. He yells for someone to go get Charles and to bring the flamethrower. I want to know, if this is a research facility, why do they have flamethrowers?
I mean, ice, I guess.
I mean, I guess so.
It helps to, melt the ice away, or, something like that. If you run out of water, you can make some quick water.
Yeah. Okay.
Oil water. I don't know. All kinds of stuff.
I want to know why they have dynamite, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger question. So McCready, he starts shooting at the alien with a shotgun. It starts like spewing slime out of it. And then it starts to grow. And we see all these like strange, like Lovecraftian eyes and stuff all over its body, and it rips open and this weird mouth comes out of it. Then next we see Blair's dissecting it. And he explains that the alien absorbs other life forms.
When this thing attacked our dogs, it tried to digest them, absorb them, and in the process shape its own cells to imitate them.
We go to another scene where we see Blair giving one of the dogs a shot, and he's talking to Clark. And this is where we really start to get into the paranoia of the film. He asks him, he's like,
how long were you alone with that dog?
I don't know, an hour and a half, maybe. What the hell are you looking at me like that for?
We start to see that he's not trusting Clark.
Yeah.
Which is a seed that's planted that we kind of follow throughout a lot of the movie. And then we go to another scene where they're watching videos of the Norwegian camp.
Seems like they were spending a lot of their time in a little place northeast of their camp, about 5 or 6 miles.
What's that? It looks like something buried under the ice.
And they end up flying out there to go take a look at it. One of the cool things that honestly I didn't notice, all of these shots of them looking at this ship are matte paintings.
I worked with Albert Whitlock for the first and only time I've worked with him. I've been a great fan of his work. And he's a man of unique talent. He does amazing things with paint and brush. And he did for us. He created this giant flying saucer in the middle of the snow at a scale we couldn't do. And he solved some lighting problems for us, because painting a snowscape with the correct light on it is not as easy as you might think. We had to do a lot of work on that.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of thought that, like, that first shot when they kind of look down into it, you can tell it's a little, I mean, you can tell they're not looking into a giant hole with a spaceship in it. You can tell it's something.
But I mean, it looks great.
Yeah.
It looks so good.
Yeah, it really does. And I think I really only noticed probably because I watched it on my projector, but it doesn't matter. It looks cool.
Yeah, for sure. We cut to after they're back, and Childs is saying,
I just cannot believe any of this voodoo bullshit.
I didn't know, but this is Keith David's first film.
Is it? Okay, that's interesting.
Which which kind of blew my mind. Like, I was watching him talk about it, and he was like, "Yeah, this was my first movie." I was like, "What the hell? I've been watching this guy since I was like a little kid. He's in so many things."
Yeah, he's been in a ton of stuff. So yeah, I always just have figured he was, maybe not been in a ton of stuff before this, but at least in a couple of things.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely looks young, but I was like, "Oh, this guy's just always been around."
How's this motherfucker wake up after thousands of years in the ice?
And how can it look like a dog? I don't know how. Because it's different than us, see? Because it's from outer space. What do you want from me? Ask him.
Blair is just sitting, just kind of watching everybody, not saying anything. And then we see this really high resolution image of a computer where we see a dog cell and an alien cell, and the dog and the alien cell absorbs it and then becomes it. And the projection is, if intruder organism reaches civilized areas, entire world population infected in 27,000 hours from first contact. So we know that this is serious. We see Bennings and Windows moving the alien remains into a storage room, which, seems like a bad idea to me, but
yeah. Yeah, there are definitely a couple of bad ideas that I think they, like, why bring it there in the first place? I think that was my first gripe of it, was like, do you really want to pick that thing up and bring it back? Like, I think it's fine where it is.
And then we cut to another scene quickly of Fuchs wanting to talk to McCready.
There's something wrong with Blair.
They're talking, and Fuchs is like, "Hey, I'm reading Blair's notes. He seems really crazy. Like, he's not talking to anybody."
So is Blair cracking up or what?
McCready, there is still cellular activity in these burned remains. They're not dead yet.
And then we cut back to the storeroom, and we see Bennings getting absorbed by the alien, and we see the alien Bennings run out into the snow, and everybody's chasing after him, and he's screaming, and he's got these weird deformed hands, and McCready runs over there, and he knocks over a big oil drum and throws a flare and burns them up. They figure out that all these remains still have cellular life, so they go and they burn all the other remains. After they're burning the remains, McCready turns around and he sees somebody running away with an axe from the helicopter, and he goes over to check the helicopter, and it's destroyed. And then we hear a bunch of gunshots inside the camp, and we see McCready running down the hallway, and we see Blair just destroying all the radio equipment and yelling at everybody, screaming and
going crazy.
He's paranoia
crazy, for sure.
He's the first one to figure it out.
Yeah. He puts two and two together. I mean, he's the doctor, so he puts everything together before everybody else, and it's screw all this.
No dog's making 1,000 miles to the coast. No, you don't understand. That thing wanted to be on.
And he's shooting, and he runs out of bullets and throws his gun. And then we see McCready and the other guys. They just rush him and they beat him down. Then they go and they lock him into the tool shed. There's so many good lines in this movie, but this is This is some of my favorite. McCready's like, "How you doing, old buddy?" He's like,
I don't know who to trust.
I know what you mean, Blair. Trust's a tough thing to come by these days.
Blair's not smiling. He's looking at him and he says,
Yeah.
"Watch Clark."
I said, watch Clark. And watch him close. Do you hear me?
So I've got a question. We don't have to answer it right now, but I want to bring it up now. But when does Blair become the alien? Because up until now, I mean, he's acting crazy. He's acting irrational, but also understandably so, as we've kind of discussed. He's acting in humanity's best interest so far.
Yeah, I don't think it's now. It comes a little bit later. I don't 100% remember the exact circumstance. It'll probably click with me whenever you continue going on, but I don't think it's happened yet.
So next we get a discussion outside. They're trying to figure out how they can know who is human, and they kind of come up with this blood test idea. And there's no blood.
All gone.
All the blood's all been slashed open and spilling all over the floor. It's all contaminated. So then we cut to another scene, which is another one of my favorites, where they're burning the blood bags.
I know I'm human. And if you were all these things, then you'd just attack me right now. So some of you are still human.
This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open.
If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
Yeah, that's a dark, just ominous. I guess it's a monologue.
Yeah, it's like one of the great monologues. This one, and then the blood test. It sets this darkness over the film even more, and kind of sets us up for where it comes later on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna hide this tape when I'm finished. If none of us make it, at least there'll be some kind of record. The storm's been hitting us hard now for 48 hours. We still have nothing to go on.
I love the shots in particular of the end of this scene, because Carpenter said that he had thought about having like a shadow go across the hallway in that scene, but decided against it, because if you shoot him just in the side of the frame with a lot of negative space behind him, it forces you to look behind him. And then you get a reverse shot of just the camera looking at him through the doorway, and it looks like somebody's watching him.
Okay.
which is it kind of makes you feel like he's being watched, like from behind his back, like which is something that Carpenter did a lot. He uses the camera as a point of view. Like Halloween is like almost all point of view shots. It makes you feel like you're watching, someone is watching your
You're just standing there in the middle of it.
Yes, and you're standing there observing it. It's creepy. So we see the power go out, and then we get another fade out. Time passes. Fuchs is missing. The power is back on, and they go out looking for him.
Hey, Blair! Blair, have you seen Fuchs?
And Blair is sitting in the tool shed, and what's hanging next to him?
What is hanging? That's a good question. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Hanging next to Blair is a noose.
I don't want to stay out here anymore. I want to come back inside.
You know, if there was anything wrong with me, I'm better now. I want to come back in, and they just closed the door on him. So to me, I think that at this point he's probably changed. As we find out later, he's dug a tunnel under the tool shed, and he's been building a helicopter. So he had to have had some time to do that. So he had to have been changed for at least a little while.
Yeah, so it does make sense that it's happens before this scene. Yeah, now that you're laying it out for me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
why would he be building the helicopter if he thinks, before he was thinking the world is going to end and, this thing is going to kill the entire planet or something. And yeah, now he's worrying about escaping.
Knowles and McCready, they see the light on in McCready's cabin, so they go to check that out. We get another fade out. Time passes, and they still haven't come back. And everyone in the camp is starting to barricade all the outside doors.
Hey! All of you, come here!
We see Knowles come through the door, and they're like, "Hey, where's McCready?" And he's, "Well, I found the ripped up shirt with his name on it. I'm like, I cut him loose. He's one of the aliens." And then we see the door handle start turning, and it's McCready trying to get inside. They hear the glass shatter, and he climbs in through the storeroom. Charles breaks the door down with an axe.
Anyone messes with me and the whole camp goes.
And they all think he's the Thing.
Yeah, his beard's all frozen.
Hey, I'm in it. It's cool, McCready. It's cool, man. Come on.
And Norris falls back, and he's like knocked out, like he's not breathing. They take Norris to the infirmary.
Windows, wheel that defibrillator over here. Put some beats on those paddles.
You're gonna have to sleep sometime, McCready.
Oh, real light sleeper, child.
And they bring out the defibrillator, and they shock him, and nothing. And they shock him again, and just as the paddles are about to hit his chest, a big old mouth opens up.
Yeah.
And this is the scene that terrified me as a little kid. I remember watching this with my dad as a little kid, and not knowing. I mean, I can't imagine anyone watching this movie for the first time would have any idea that something like this would happen. Man, I have so many notes for this scene.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite like practical effects scenes. I don't think it's one of the like cooler looking, but I think it's probably one of the more impressive scenes with practical effects in it.
First of all, the arms that go into the chest are made of Jello.
We had wax bones built into the arms, and we had rubber veins and gelatin veins and all this stuff, so it was like, living tissue. And at this point, what we did was we actually took a mold of the actor's face that was playing the doctor, and what we did was we actually found a guy that had no arms. So his arms were actually cut off here.
So as he's like putting his arms in there and like pulls them out, and there's like blood squirting everywhere, they just made this mask in a scream that they glued onto this dude's face.
Yeah. That's funny.
Which is just like so strange and creative.
Yeah.
Like that's the cool thing about some of these practical effects. You have to do like weird problem solving, like things that you wouldn't think about. McCready lights it on fire, and we see the head start stretching off, and all this like green like tentacles and goo under the neck and stuff. And
yeah, that's one of my favorite, I think, shots from that is the head ripping off, and you see all the little tentacles and everything inside, because it's a lot of them. And yeah, one of my questions to you was like, how long do you think it would take just to one, make all that stuff, and then run through all the sequences of all of it happening? Like, it's got to be an insane amount of time to put all that together.
Yes. I mean, like I said, the special effects guy was like, on set for over a year, and barely slept, and went to the hospital at the end of it for exhaustion because of all
Yeah.
the work he had to do for this. So it is very intense. It takes a lot of time, and Carpenter said that he was always behind. Like, these were always the shots that took forever, and they would take hours to set up, like the shot of the Venus flytrap body opening up. They said it took like 8 hours to set that shot up, because you have the actual guy, like laying at an angle, and you have a fake body laying on top of him, and then they have to do makeup all around his neck to try and blend it together. And Carpenter said that after they had finished doing the entire movie, they were still having to go back to the studio and do separate special effects shots. So some of these shots you see are like done months afterwards in a studio. They're just a single shot here, a single shot there, and it was all like piecemeal put together.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just a
so much.
I don't know what word I'm looking for to describe it, but it's just a crazy scene of all this stuff happening.
It's unique. There's nothing like it. And a lot of that stuff, they're just sort of figuring it out as they go along. They're like, well, how do we make this? Like the neck that stretches out, he didn't know how to make that. He was just like, well, I'll just like melt a bunch of plastic and a bunch of like gum and stuff and put it all together.
Just some nutty concoction we made that'll stretch, bubble gum and whatnot, plastic melted down. They're going like, it doesn't smell too good, So I go, well, we better hurry up and shoot it, right? So the camera set, everything's ready, and then Carpenter goes, wait a minute. Shouldn't there be fire, like underneath the lens here? The head's stretching off, but nobody's seeing it. So just for continuity, we want a little fire in the foreground. Meantime, nobody's thinking about it, and I didn't either. But the room is filling up with, explosive fumes. On the gas. Psh, stuff's coming out, and the guy's up there with a like a lighter, and he's, and finally, it ignites, right? And the whole effect, the whole Hallahan, replica body explodes, right?
Oh man.
And it was like hours and hours worth of work just to redo that shot. But yeah, so the head stretches and drops down, and this is my favorite shot because we see the tongue lash out, and he starts pulling itself into under the desk, which is a reverse shot. So something like this, you see that they start out with the tongue stretched out, and then they pull it back. So when you play in reverse, it looks like it's like shooting out. There's a lot of little shots that if you pay attention, they're actually reverse shots. And then all of a sudden these like crazy big spider legs sprout out of it. And I love the fact that the head is upside down.
Yeah.
It just makes it even weirder.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
And it's a wonder they don't like burn this entire place down before the end of the movie. The amount of times they just shoot the flamethrower at stuff.
Yeah, luckily they have always got extinguishers very close by.
Yeah.
So after they burn up the head, they would go into the blood test scene.
What do you got in mind, McCready?
A little test. Windows. You and Palmer, tie everybody down real tight.
Charles refuses. He's like, you're not going to tie me down. And McCready goes, total Clint Eastwood on him. He's like, well, I'll just have to kill you then.
I mean it.
I guess you do.
So I was saying, you're kind of wondering what he's doing with the giant spool of wire, and like you see him like cutting it a little earlier, and then you see him just like holding it in front of the flamethrower, like heating the wire up, and you're like, what the hell is he doing? And then, yeah, when they start slicing their fingers open with the scalpel. It's just, I don't know why, but that's one of the like cringier moments in the movie, because there's no way I would do that.
We're gonna draw a little bit of everybody's blood. Because we're gonna find out who's the thing. You see, when a man bleeds, it's just tissue. The blood from one of you things won't obey when it's attacked.
When you're watching this the first time, what are you expecting? Like, what does this make any sense to you? Not really.
Not really. Yeah, like it just. Yeah, I had no clue what they were about to do.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like it doesn't, unless he sort of figured something out from watching how this thing, it will rip itself apart to try and survive, but no one else has really figured this out. They're just so like dumbstruck by the craziness of it, and nobody in the movie believes what he's doing either. They're all like, this is, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. He tests his own blood. Nothing happens.
It's a crock of shit.
Yeah, he tests Copper's blood. He's fine. Copper's already dead. He tests Clark's blood. He's fine.
And Clark was human, huh? Which makes you a murderer, don't it?
Yeah, you're kind of expecting him to have had something, because
I mean, yeah, as we said, they've planted that seed through the whole movie. Like, he is the sort of the creepy loner guy that hung out with the dogs, and like, you expected him to be the one.
This is pure nonsense. Doesn't prove a thing.
I thought you'd feel that way, Gary. You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
It pops out, it jumps up, and he drops it. Which a funny note for that is, if you look closely, the hand that's holding that dish is a fake hand, and something shoots up from through the hand into the dish and makes it pop up. But so the blood jumps up. That's Palmer's blood, and then the guy that's been joking like in the last scene, who we really don't suspect at all. He starts shaking.
He's the guy smoking a joint,
and all of a sudden he's just shaking and trembling, and his head splits open. He jumps up, and this is really a Venus flytrap. Like, his head splits wide open.
Yeah.
I will say that this is the effect that probably looks the cheesiest to me, because it does just look like a dummy being thrown around. It doesn't look like a body.
Yeah.
Kind of breaks physics.
I'm assuming that this is probably a man with a suit on, or something over the top of him. So, I mean, it's kind of like what Carpenter set out not to do, but I mean, that's gonna probably happen at some point in the movie. But this is the man in a suit effect.
It still looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he's throwing them around, and then he throws windows against the wall, and he's like covered in slime, and they light up Palmer with the torch. He busts through the outside wall and runs out into the snow. And McCready throws a stick of dynamite at him and just blows him up. And then they go and they set windows on fire because he's starting to change. Then we cut back to the rest of the blood tests. Test Childs. Childs is fine, and all of a sudden Childs is like looking at Gary. He's like,
Cut me the hell! Come on, get me out of here! Come on, get me out of here! Cut me loose, damn it!
So then we get another jump cut. They're all standing there, like staring at Gary, holding it, and then they test Gary's blood, and he's fine too.
I know you gentlemen have been through a lot. And when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch!
Yeah, that made sense. I'd want to be untied, especially now after being tested.
Yeah, well, and he was right next to Palmer when he changed too. Like you see the look on his face
Yeah.
as that dude's changing. Like, what the fuck? I'm about to die.
Yeah. Like the three of them are all still tied to the chair where all this shit's going on. They're lighting them on fire and all this stuff, and they're just helpless, tied up on the chairs.
Then we get a fade out, and they're going out to test Blair's blood.
Mac, the door's open. How'd he get out? The door was bolted from the outside.
And then they find the tunnel under the tool shed, and they find the the alien ship. They figure out, at some point he changed, and he's been, taking the parts from the helicopter and trying to get out of Antarctica.
Blair's been busy out here all by himself.
Then we get this like a little tracking shot back in the cabin, and we start to hear that thrumming music again, and it tracks out to that door where Charles was supposed to be standing, and he's gone. And then all the power goes out. They're like, well, the power's out. It's going to be like 100 below out here soon. And Gary's like, hey, that's suicide. We'll all die.
Not for that thing. It wants to freeze now. It's got no way out of here. It just wants to go to sleep in the cold until the rescue team finds it.
And at this point, McCready has resigned himself. He's like, well, whether we make it out of here or not, we can't let that thing freeze again. Maybe we'll just warm things up around here. And then they start to blow up the camp. We see them running through the hallways and throwing the dynamite. And
yep.
So they blow up the camp. They go down and they're planning the charges down in the basement. And it's McCready, it's Knowles, and it's Gary. They're all planning the charges. Gary is off by himself planting one of the charges, and then we see Blair pop out. Then he disappears, and Knowles is looking around for him. He can't find Gary, and he walks off into the dark, and then Knowles disappears, and McCready's looking around, and he's like suddenly all by himself. Then the floor just explodes. And we get this crazy shot of like the tentacle breaking through the floor and grabbing the plunger to light all the charges. It pulls it down, and then we get this gigantic creature just bust up out of the floor, which is just the amalgamation of all of the things that is absorbed. According to John Carpenter in the commentary, he said that they were up on a stage. They had people under the floor controlling this thing. He said that literally 50 people were controlling different parts of this monster.
It's big too.
It's huge, and there's a ton of different pieces and moving parts to it. So if you've got one person controlling each little movement,
everything's got to move kind of independently.
Yeah, so it makes sense, but that's so much. That's crazy. McCready dives back. He grabs the dynamite. He throws it.
Yeah, fuck you too.
And then we just see a huge wide shot of just the whole camp erupting and in flames and going down. And Then we see McCready limping through the snow, and he comes into the burned up remains of one of the buildings, and he sits down, and then we see Childs pop up behind him.
You the only one who made it?
Not the only one.
He says he thought he saw Blair, so he went out after him in the storm. You know, they're like the fire's up all over the temperature's up all over the camp, but it won't last very long.
Yeah. Neither will we.
How will we make it?
Maybe we should.
If we've got any surprises for each other, I don't think we're in much shape to do anything about it. And it's like, what will we do? And he's like,
why don't we just wait here for a little while? See what happens.
And we hear the thrumming music, and then we fade out into the credits, and we've reached the end of John Carpenter's The Thing. What is your feeling about this ending?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be my question, of course, to you, having seen it more times than me, but I take it as Childs is the alien, and McCready knows it, and you know, they just kind of end it ambiguously, that he's just kind of like accepted his fate almost at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unknowable.
Yes.
Because I've watched it so many times, and every time I watch it, I've sort of changed my opinion. It's like, well, maybe McCready's an alien, because like after you see the thing blow up, you don't, you know, there's a few minutes there where you don't see him. Like he was right next to the alien. He could have been absorbed by it too. You know, he was hurt. He was right next to that explosion. So how do you even make it out? Like there's no way to know.
Yeah.
You know, I honestly, I prefer the idea that neither one of them are, but they're both so paranoid of each other that they're going to sit there and freeze to death.
Yeah. I mean, that thought definitely crossed my mind too, that they're just, well, it's over. Let's have a drink. And
yeah.
But I think like Child's disappearing is a little bit more kind of suspicious, that he just goes away and pops up at the end. And I don't know if it's intentional or not, but when they're talking to each other in those last couple of lines, McCready, you can see his breath coming out, and Child's is not.
Yes, that is a big theory. That's a big theory for this movie, that you can see McCready's breath but not Child's. Keith David says that it's because of the way that the light was. You see the reflection of the fire on Kurt Russell's face, so that makes you see the breath, whereas he's in the dark, so you can't really see his breath.
Easy explained error, possibly, or you know, it could be intentional.
Yeah, it's unknowable, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I just love about Carpenter, because every one of his movies sort of ends like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Like it just sort of ends, and you're like, it leaves you hanging on a question, and you can never know.
Yeah, it's definitely not meant to know, but it's fun to figure out.
Yes, it's fun to think about for sure.
Yeah.
So to wrap things up, there's a few other interesting notes that I have about the movie. They shot an alternate ending just to cover themselves. You see McCready get a blood test, and he's a human, and he gets like rescued by a team coming in. And the studio tried to force him to use that ending because they said it was too bleak, and he refused.
Nice.
We'll get into it in a second, but this movie bombed when it came out, and part of the reason that people say that is because the studio didn't believe in it. They thought it was way too bleak and gross and scary, and people wouldn't accept it because just wasn't anything like this at the time.
Yeah.
So they didn't promote it. They didn't believe in it. So the other reason that people say that this movie did not do well was 2 weeks before it was released another Alien movie. Do you know what that movie is, Chris?
Was it Close Encounters?
No, that's in the 70s. But
Okay.
it is
Okay.
another Spielberg movie.
E.T.
E.T. So the friendly alien movie that brings hope and joy to everyone's life came out 2 weeks before this and became the highest grossing movie of all time at that time.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks later, a dark, grimy, nasty, bleak alien movie comes out, and no one wanted to see that. The two biggest critics at the time, Siskel and Ebert, reviewed the movie. It's on YouTube. Siskel said he liked the movie. He thought it was too gross, but he liked the paranoid aspects of it, and Ebert hated it.
I'm going to recommend it, but serve notice that a lot of people who see it will be made sick by it.
I think that's probably an understatement. I would call this the barf bag movie of July. I have some problems with it. One of them is, I think, the characters. They're not made into three-dimensional people. Their function is to walk down the corridor and be jumped on, so that the story is totally implausible, and the movie just basically is an excuse for this very gruesome and repellent creature to gross us out. It is the most nauseating thing I've ever seen on a movie screen.
I mean, they were huge at the time. People really followed their opinions. So that was just sunk the movie. But since then, it became a cult classic movie. Home video, like some other great cult classics, really saved this movie. People saw it at home and loved it, and it's since become considered one of the greatest sci-fi horror films ever made.
Yeah. Just
what are your final thoughts, Chris?
I was just, it seems like it was just a movie that was, well too early. The world just wasn't ready for something like that. And yeah, I mean, it's a shame to hear that such a great movie is not considered a hit, but does that really matter? I don't think it really matters. I would say a movie that, what are we talking? Almost 40 years later is considered a masterpiece, and will just continue to live on and be the masterpiece that it is. And how many other movies that probably made way more money than just faded out and nobody probably talks about anymore. I'm sure there's quite a few.
Yeah, there are people that still talk about E.T., but this,
I could give a crap about E.T.
I like Spielberg, so he makes good movies, but something like this really burns itself into your brain and is much more memorable. Like I said at the beginning, this is one of my all-time favorites. It's something that you can go back to and you'll never fully get it, and that's one of the things that makes it great, because you can keep asking questions about it. You can keep figuring out little things like the shadow might be Norris, or all those little details. That's what makes it a masterpiece. Carpenter has since said that it was his most difficult movie, and he also feels like it was the best film he ever made. And I 100% agree with that. There's just so many more levels and layers and details and things that you can go back to.
Yeah, and Lovecraftian elements
and Lovecraft,
as well.
Yeah.
This is my favorite. I haven't seen them all, but this is my favorite Carpenter movie. Definitely enjoy it better than Halloween. As much as I do like Halloween, Yeah, this is so much more interesting of a movie. Yeah, rewatching it is still just as fun as it was the first time, if not even more.
So we'll close it up here. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you made it to the end of this, I really appreciate it. Hopefully you found it interesting. Hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. If you enjoyed this sort of discussion, this sort of in-depth breakdown, again, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment down below. Is this your favorite Carpenter movie? Do you like Halloween or one of his other ones more? Let's have a discussion. Let me know. Until next time, I'll see you. Bye.